started. Let's get the latest read on all of this and the significance of it with Mark Green, the Tennessee congressman, sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, great to have you. These are staggering numbers, Congressman. It seems that every time we meet, they get even more staggering. But I'm wondering if it's resonating with people. Certainly, you know, from the White House and the approach we're taking, there's been no change.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any concern from the administration. Now, you look at the Democrat mayors in Washington, D.C. and in New York City, and they're starting to get excited about it because, you know, Governor Abbott is sending buses of those migrants to their cities, and they're beginning to feel what Texas and the border states have felt for decades. And it's not sustainable. What's happening from the administration is not sustainable, and their fingers are in their ears, I guess. They're just not listening.
All right, so what do? We talk about those apprehended. We don't really get into the details of gotaways or those that managed to pour through the border, but pouring does seem to be the operative word here. It is out of control. We're not beefing up manpower at the border. So obviously those trying to get in have a calculated edge here. Where do you see this going?
Well, it's only going to continue, and it will get worse. Way worse, because the president is completely ignoring what really worked, and that's, you know, the migrant protection protocols. That decreased 87% of the flow across the southern border. Those interactions. Mexico has agreed not to send people back, so it's a double whammy. And the president doesn't seem to care. I mean, huge increase in fentanyl deaths, 5,000 pounds of fentanyl alone. Fentanyl deaths in Tennessee have doubled. I mean, it's really, they're just ignoring it. They're absolutely ignoring it. So it's only going to get worse.
So I'm just curious, when they talk about, you know, bipartisan, real immigration reform, that's been tried and tested, ever since the days of Ronald Reagan. And I'm wondering if anything will come of it, and whether Republicans put something on the table to say, all right, we do this and open ourselves up to this. You, Democrats, the administration more to the point, beef up security at the border or build a wall. How would you characterize the next step if you had your druthers?
So the most important thing we can do is reinstate some form of migrant protection protocols. And there are ideas being floated on how to do that, even with a Democrat administration. I'm actually meeting with Mike McCall, the chairman of Foreign Affairs, to look at some aid that we can negotiate with countries like Panama and Guatemala to stop it there, or institute some form of the migrant protection protocols with our foreign aid through the budget once we're in the majority. So there are a lot of ideas that are out there floating around. I think we can make some of those happen, but we've got to win the majority. And if anything's going to happen at the southern border.
Real quickly, Congressman, I know you serve in the Armed Services Committee. You're aware of some of these heightened tensions between ourselves and the Chinese. Now, of course, they've moved a battleship near Sri Lanka. That's got the Indians upset, to put it mildly. They're taunting Taiwan. We've got joint military exercises between ourselves and the South Koreans planned, we're told, for next week. This is getting messy. It doesn't take much for a false trigger, does it?
No, that's an important point to make. But I think the Chinese are watching what happens in Ukraine. They're seeing the West push back. They're getting a little louder. There's also a new president in South Korea who is very pro-America. So they're going to get loud, but hopefully the president doesn't back down. The exercises happen, and China sees that, you know, Taiwan, it cannot be taken by China. I mean, Xi's promised to his people, it can't happen. 94% of the high-end semiconductors there, the supply chain crisis that we have had will look like a kid's playpen. We're going to do everything we can not to let that happen, and China should know that.
So just to be clear, sir, that if China were to try to seize Taiwan, you think the U.S. should intervene militarily?
So you're asking me about the old adage of strategic ambiguity and whether or not we should throw that to the curb. And there are people who say we should. There are people who say we shouldn't. Clearly, the administration, the president himself has said, you know, that we would, and then walked that back.